Welcome back to the Innovative Accountant Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Coquell, and we have an exciting podcast for our listeners today. Today, we're going to look at the myth of selling and is it a dirty word? And do the most successful salespeople have ethics? And is that possible to sell and still be ethical and show integrity? We've got the perfect guest on our show today, Adrian Davis. He is the president and CEO of Whetstone, which is a company based out of Toronto that provides sales training, coaching, keynote speaking on various topics around sales management. Adrian's had a very successful career. He is a business strategist, a trusted advisor, has worked with many of the world's largest companies. He's been involved in the top 5 accounting firms and doing work from them on the sales and business development side, and speaks across the world today. And so I worked with companies like DuPont, Johnson & Johnson. Very exciting to have you on the show today, Adrian. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about being here.
Yeah, so where are we finding you today, Adrian? Are you in Toronto?
I'm actually just outside of Toronto in Oakville.
Oakville, okay. Well, it's been an interesting time in terms of travel. I know you're probably normally all over the place. How's things been going with COVID and your business these days?
Actually, COVID has been extremely good for business. And I guess for me early on, Tim, I made a very quick and sharp and deep pivot into this virtual setup. So I set up a whole home studio, and the timing was just perfect. I guess, prior to that, I was traveling like crazy. I was really optimized for travel. I had traveled down to like a science, right? And then this whole thing hit, and I was actually glad when it first hit, because I had a couple of weeks where I was just sitting back and I didn't have to travel, and I actually appreciated just having a break.
Gave you a break, yeah.
Yeah, but it just occurred to me, Tim, that you know what? This might be around for a while. And so I just made a significant investment in setting up a home studio, and it was just perfect. Like all of a sudden customers were looking for training. The people were off the road. They thought, now's the perfect time to train. And there's a proficiency that we develop as well, that I was able to develop some proficiency in terms of working with a home studio. And so, as I said, COVID has been phenomenal for business.
Well, the entrepreneurial mindset, right? I know you've been in business a long time. When there's disruption and challenges, it's how you sort of embrace that. And
exactly
it sounds
right.
like you've been able to pivot a little bit, and it's worked out very well for you. So
and there's always challenges, so we've always got to look ahead. And it's unfortunate because COVID is devastating for many, and for many businesses and small businesses. But I think you're right. We always have to have an eye on the future and be willing to make those agile pivots.
Yeah. So Adrian, let's talk a little bit. I always like with our guests on the podcast to try and get to the root of what drives them, their passion. Obviously, you're running a very successful sales organization that does the training. What got you into sales in the first place? Why are you so passionate about what you do?
Well, I absolutely love this question. I appreciate you asking it. I could take up the whole hour just answering this, but let me make a long story short. And, I would say, Tim, I had a bit of a painful start. I was born into a home of domestic violence. Father was a very violent man. We basically had to flee. My mom and my 3 siblings and I, we had to flee for our lives. And that led me, actually, maybe I'll just back up a little bit. I do remember one particular incident. I was 6 years old, and my father was brutally beating up my mother. And I just remember being helpless, crying, tears streaming down my eyes, just felt helpless and powerless. And I just remember saying to myself, this is wrong. When I grow up, I'm going to get married and I'm going to do it right. And that, I remember that day like it was yesterday. Today, next April, actually, I'll be celebrating 30 years of a phenomenal marriage. And I just made that commitment at 6 years old. And I mention it because it speaks to sales. It will come around to sales. And then when I was a teenager, I became very troubled. I was a very troubled, angry teenager. That led to a bout with homelessness for me. Ended up driving taxi for a while, and it's a bit of a long story, but I finally figured out I've got to sort myself out. And I went back to school, went on to university, and was running short of money and decided I'm not going to quit. I have to finish. So I started my own business, and it was a little advertising company. I created a publication of, here are all the things I wish I knew when I started university. So some orientation kit for new students. And I just put advertising spaces in it. Hopped on my bicycle and went around the city selling to retailers who wanted to reach the university market. And that's how I discovered sales. And
Wow.
Tim, I absolutely loved it. It was like I suddenly had this moment of clarity. Like, this is what I want to be a professional salesperson. I felt valuable. I felt that I was really helping people. I felt that I was creating value. And as I said, I just had this moment of absolute clarity. This is what I want to be a professional salesperson. And at that moment, I just thought, I didn't understand why there was this stigma associated with sales. That you sort of think of the used car salesman.
Yeah.
And to me, it made no sense at all. This was the greatest value that I could bring, is to be this interface between a customer and the value that they're looking for. And I set out, I said, I'm going to be a professional salesperson, and I'm going to prove that one can have integrity, and not just that they can have integrity and be successful, but that you can be very successful as a person with integrity. So I just I'm going to study this craft, I'm going to understand it, and I'm going to prove that there's nothing dirty about it. And that was some 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And it still drives me today. It's just this, I feel like it's a calling.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such an inspirational story, Adrian. I didn't understand your roots, and thank you for being open and sharing that. That's
yeah, if you don't mind,
challenges has made you where you're at, right? And how successful you've been.
And I'll just sort of close the loop with the marriage piece. That, when I started to move through sales, and I studied everything I could read on it, and I started to move in some pretty good circles, very experienced salespeople. And I can remember I was with this technology company, and I got my first sale, and people were very proud because it was a decent sale, and I got it pretty quickly. And somebody sent out an email, kind of copy everybody, Adrian has drawn first blood. And I'm like, what? It's like, is that how we think about our prospects, that I've drawn first blood? And this other sort of, you kill what you eat, or you eat what you kill, sorry. And to me, I say, no. Sales is more like marriage. It's like you're dating, you're steady dating, you're courting, you're getting engaged, and then there's a business commitment that you make to each other. We're going to work together and co-create value together. And I think that metaphor of marriage is a far better metaphor than this notion of hunting and killing your prospects. So that whole experience that I had early on around a failed marriage and being determined to build a healthy marriage, that informs my understanding of sales as well. That is all, whether it's a business relationship or a personal relationship, how we treat one another matters, and relationships matter. And so how we frame these relationships really matters. And the idea that, for me to sell something to you is somehow soiled and dirty, that's just a very, very poor framing. How about, hey, I have the opportunity to really create value for you and to advance your life, to help you move toward your goals. That's really what we're doing here when we talk about sales.
Yeah, I love that. I love the partnership.
Right on.
That's really when you're looking at a marriage and then you're comparing that to a client experience, it is a partnership. And I agree that I think often people in the sales industry, it's like once you kind of get that first yes, you think you've won, and it's more of a competition than it is a relationship building exercise. And we had another guest on our podcast, Mark Bowden, that talked about.
I know Mark.
Yeah, Mark well. Yeah. We were chatting about that, and I asked him a similar question, and he explained that it's about helping. Like using the word sales sometimes is even not the right word, right? It's how are we helping people and what are we doing? So I love that. I love that you're coming at it from the ethical standpoint. So let's talk a little bit about Whetstone. So how did you start Whetstone? I love the name. I love the story of it. Maybe you can share a little bit about how you came up with the name, how you started the company.
So how I started the company, I grew up in technology sales, CRM, billing systems, financial systems, always enterprise-wide software platforms that I was selling. The last company that I was selling for was phenomenally successful. I came in around employee 100. 2 years later, we had 1,200 employees. We had gone public. The stock had split twice. It was just a phenomenal story. But fundamentally, I realized the company was unethical, that we were selling these mission-critical billing systems to telco companies. And these are big systems to implement. Well, I figured it out. I understood how to sell it, and I was quite successful. I was 300% above quota at a time when the economy was collapsing, and people were getting laid off because they couldn't even reach 50% of their quota. But, I was really quite effective, and it's how I discovered storytelling in sales as well. But I realized they didn't care about the implementations. So I was making a promise to people. They were trusting me. We were, going forward with these big projects, and then we were not following through. So I just realized I can't do this. You cannot pay me enough money to ruin my reputation. And so I resigned. And I took a year off. I remember I came home. I was flying back, and I came back, and my daughter was walking. And I just realized, like, wow, I'm everywhere. I'm on a plane. My address, my business card should have said, the different flights that I was constantly taking. And I just said, I'm not doing this. I'm not, I'm compromising my reputation. My children are growing up without me. And I knew I wasn't going to, I was going to be a successful husband and father. So I quit, I resigned, and I took a year off, bought a nice home in the country, and I just focused on my family. And then around, sort of 9 months in, I started to go out. I joined Toastmasters. I had been in Toastmasters before, but I rejoined Toastmasters, and I started speaking. I started speaking about sales and sales process and sales integrity. And somebody approached me afterward and said, I loved what you said. Will you coach me? I said, sure. And then she said, and I'll pay you. I said, okay, even better. I didn't expect that. I was just happy to do it. And so I coached her, and she really enjoyed it. But then she ran into conflict with her company in terms of the approach that I was taking and the approach that they wanted. So she's like, you know what? This is great, but you got to talk to my business executives because they're pushing a different approach. So then they brought me in, and that led me to consulting. I went from coaching to consulting pretty quickly. And then later on, as I started to develop this, I went into training. And I realized that that's really my passion, is training. We still do consulting, but we do consulting in order to go to the training. And I realized that fundamentally I'm an educator. So that's where the business is really scaled. I think there's some unique content that we bring to the table, and I think we're quite effective in giving the people we train the right skills and behaviors and attitudes in order to be successful. In terms of the name, Tim, I started during the whole .com. Everything was this and .com that. And I sat down with my graphic designer, and I said, look, this is where I'm going. This is the mission. This is what I want to do. And he's the one that came back and came up with this name, Whetstone. So what I said to him was, I don't want a name that sounds like a fad. I don't want to be anything. I don't want to be .com anything. Yeah. I'll come up with a name that sounds like it's going to be around it's been around for a while, and it's going to be around for a while. And so he came back with this name, Whetstone, and I just loved it. The whole concept of what a whetstone is.
Talk a little about sharpening the saw, and I also love you've got sort of the W and the M, and there's some
right on. Yes,
they're just so creative. You mentioned storytelling, and I just thought you did such an excellent job seeing it in real life within your business and seeing how you tell the story of your company. And I thought, obviously you know what you're talking about. So just share a little bit about that, the sharpening the saw, the me and we.
Beautiful. I appreciate your research. So whetstone, so the logo you're referring to is the W over the M, and the M is somewhat constricted, meaning when we have a selfish, me first, self-centered approach, we're very limited, and we're confining ourselves and our abilities. Whereas when we think in terms of a we space, let's create a space where you and I can collaborate and trust each other and build together, co-create together. This is expansive, and it's how we rise together. So that's the logo. It's sort of flipping the script from, hey, me first and me only, to let's create a mutually beneficial relationship. The whetstone, in terms of symbolism, is this. Whetstone is a stone that's used with water to sharpen tools, right? So the idea of a stone is, to me, these are timeless principles. So there are fundamental principles that will 100 years from now, they will still be true. So let's build our interventions around these timeless principles, but also the idea that you use water so that you don't damage the tools, that the water sort of smooths out the process. Well, to me, water is always fresh. It's like right now.
Fluid. Yeah.
It's fluid. So every organization that we intervene with, first of all, we bring the timeless principles. but they need to provide the water, right? So it's their current situation and their insights into how their business works. That's what's going to smooth this out, that we can't just impose our approach onto an organization. We have to understand the organization and leverage the things that they're doing well, but bring these timeless principles to them.
Yeah, I love it. I love the story and I love the imagery. Nailed it. So it's great. Let's talk a little bit about your team. So the team at Whetstone, you've got a group of people with you. You also got some resource partners that you, I think, work quite a bit with. Share a bit of that with us.
Yeah, so fundamentally, Whetstone really is my wife and I. She does back office, I do front office. But I'm also the principal partner with a company called the Summit Group. And we have a wide range of consultants. All of us are like 30 plus years experience in sales management, in strategic account management, and consulting, as well as training. So anything that and we work with some very significant companies around the world. We also work with smaller organizations. But what we're looking for is organizations that really want to grow. They want to get to that next level. And so we will help them in terms of assessing their processes, their people, figuring out what changes need to be made, and then helping them develop the competencies and the skills and the behaviors and the attitudes in order to achieve that next level.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So there's sort of the four things you talked about: strategic sales, training, which you've obviously shared your passion for the training side of that. You've also got strategic account management that you do. Talk a little bit about how that's different.
Yeah,
what you do there.
Yeah, so it's thanks for the question. It's significantly different. So think of strategic selling as the acquisition of significant customers. So every organization has what I would call an ideal customer profile, that you and I could be in the exact same industry, but there's a customer that's right for you that's not right for me. And the sooner we figure that out, the more momentum we're going to get. So strategic selling is about acquiring these ideal customers. Whereas strategic account management is all about what happens after you have these customers. And they're very clearly significantly important to your account or to your company. How do you then treat these accounts in a way that's going to create momentum for them? And that in turn is going to create momentum for you. So it's really, I would say that strategic account management is really focused on the co-creation of value. So how do you take these significantly important accounts to your organization, and how do you help them create value for their customers so that they're happy to pay you and pay you a premium for the relationship that you and the interventions that you bring to them? It's a very creative and very innovative process, and it's significantly more demanding than strategic just selling.
Yeah, I love that. That there's the promise, the story, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But then you got to deliver on it. And
right on.
So how are we? How you don't want to deliver on it with the wrong clients. You want to make sure it's. So we're going to chat a little bit more about that and how you actually deliver on the promise. You also talk about value innovation. Speak to that a little bit in terms of what you're doing with organizations there.
Yeah, so value innovation, and everybody's basically it's either value innovation or commoditization, right? And almost every industry is being commoditized. So how do you stand out? How do you resist that downward pull towards commoditization? And the answer is value innovation. What is value innovation? It's really trying to well, I think most people would be familiar with Blue Ocean strategy. Blue Ocean strategy is a value innovation approach. It's not the only approach, but it's a great example of value innovation where, whatever we're doing today is going to be commoditized. We're going to find ourselves swimming in a red ocean. What do we need to do to find that next wave of value? And as I mentioned before, the real solution is the co-creation of value. It's being able to see through your customers' eyes through to their customers, and trying to understand how they're currently creating value for their customers today, what pressures they're facing, how their world is changing, and looking for those windows of opportunity where you can intervene in some way that's going to enable them to create greater value for their customers. And so that's at the heart of value innovation. And it's a very creative, very innovative, very collaborative and creative process.
Love it. Obviously, you're providing a really comprehensive offering to the companies and individuals you're working with. what is Whetstone? You talk about disruption. Every industry is being disrupted. You were recently disrupted. You've pivoted more to virtual and different things. What's Whetstone doing? What does that look like for you? How are you continually innovating? What are you doing to avoid disruption?
Yeah. And I think, I don't know what it is. I think, I was actually having a conversation with my wife about this a little while ago, but I think the start that I had in life forced me to look forward rather than backward. Mm-hmm. I've met people who are constantly looking back and constantly remembering the past. Tim, I don't do that. I mean, I think it's important to reflect on the past, but I always realized kind of growing up, hope lies in the future. And wherever you're coming from, you can make things better. So I always have this eye towards the future. And I think among my colleagues, they did not pivot fast enough. And some of them still haven't pivoted to this new reality. You have to pivot to create proficiency. If you don't pivot, you'll never develop proficiency. But as you develop proficiency in the new pivot, that opens up new doors and new opportunities. So I think, first of all, this whole notion that virtual is not going away. I think we're finally beginning to see signs that the economy is going to open up. But in talking to business leaders, they have discovered things that they didn't know about their businesses before the economic lockdown. They're seeing that their people can actually function. Many are having record sales, despite the fact that they can't physically be in front of a customer. And so this notion that now that they've realized that they can significantly reduce costs and at the same time increase revenue and profitability, there's no way they're going back to the old way. The old way is not coming back. So it's some kind of hybrid future that we're facing. And the mastery of virtual, I think, is going to be critical for every business. That you either master virtual and master video, or you're going to get left behind. So we're constantly tweaking and seeing how we can create these great experiences. In fact, we have many students, and just did this training 2 weeks ago for one of the largest glass, or maybe the largest glass manufacturer in the world. And the senior leaders who went through this training, one of them said to me, I didn't know what to expect. 4 days of virtual training. And this was actually better than in person. There are things that we were able to do virtually with people from all around the world that we would never have been able to do in person. So I think constantly refining the virtual experience so that it's ever more impactful, and that people don't even they forget that it's all virtual, right? They're so immersed in what's happening that they're really getting real value from it. So we're constantly doing that. The next thing for us now is we're investing in a whole learning management system. And being able to really bring people through a very consistent, very ordered, and very precise process for skills development in these different areas where we play. So that's what we're doing now over the next 3 months, is really creating this consistent experience by leveraging the power of learning management. And I would say creating these sort of hybrid asynchronous and synchronous learning experiences by leveraging the power of a learning management system.
That's fantastic, Adrian. Obviously, you're coaching people on how to be innovative and avoid disruption, be more resilient. Looks like you've got Whetstone's going to continue to move forward and have a bright future. That's exciting.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me just jumping into it, like for the audience, we have to realize the future is going to be very bright. I'm going to just say half and half. It's not going to be a half and half, but the future is going to be very bright for half the economy. And it's going to be very challenging and maybe very, very bleak for the other half. And the decisions that we make today we're going to benefit or suffer from the decisions we make today for the next 12 to 24 months. So I think we do need to be making these investments now so that we can thrive in this kind of uncertain, strange, unpredictable world that's coming.
For sure. And I love your comment. You've got to be looking in the windshield, looking forward. Totally. If you're not doing that, it's going to be hard to make those investments and make the adjustments and pivots and things that are required. And so I want to segue now. So this is the Innovative Accountant Podcast. We've got a community of accountants that are in public practice, and oftentimes that business is based on the rear view. It's looking at financial results that happened last year, the reporting of it. And I think trying to have that windshield focus is really important. And so I want to segue into trying to share a little bit more of your knowledge for that community. You've worked with some accounting firms. Maybe share a little bit of your experience in that regard and what you've done within the accounting community.
Maybe just two experiences, one as an employee and then one as a consultant. As an employee, in my sales career, I was very good at selling software. We had partnered with KPMG, and we were a technology company, did financial systems for the public sector. And my job, I was in telesales at the time, early in my career, and my job was to get appointments for these accountants, who would then go in and provide the more consultative sales experience to make sure that our system would fit for these public sector managers. We were great at getting the appointments for them. They were not good at closing the business, right? So, and I hope I'm not offending anybody out there, but they struggled to close the business. And right. I really longed to be in the field, right? I was very good on the phone, but I wanted to be in the field. So we just came up with this idea, I was in Ottawa. I wanted to move back to Toronto, where I was from. So this company, we were supporting KPMG in Toronto. So they hired me, and I was able to move back to Toronto, and they hired me as their business developer. So that was a bit strange, though, because they had not, this is going back when sales was a very dirty word in accounting, but they really needed to, they were consultants as well. They would provide technology services. And so they hired me as their business developer. And it was a great experience, but I was just this odd ball in this, everything was about billable time, and everything was just optimized for this accounting approach, but they wanted to get into technology sales. And I think they learned a lot in terms of how to really show up differently, listen, understand needs, write proposals that mattered, that really hit the nail on the head. So it was interesting. It was a learning experience for them, certainly a learning experience for me, because I had not really understood how accounting firms work, and that was a pretty significant accounting firm, and so that was insightful, just understanding how they work. As a consultant, and this was not that long ago, again, one of the big four accounting firms actually reached out to me to say that they were struggling with storytelling. And I don't know how they came across me in my work, but maybe it was somebody, I don't know how they did it, but they reached out to me and said, we need help with storytelling, and we'd like you to train our people so that we can write better stories and write better proposals. So I worked with them, and it was fascinating. They found it really fascinating. And I think the fundamental difference between what they were doing before was this information dump. So that was number one. Number two, it was all about the firm. So when you looked at what they were writing, it was basically, this is who we are, this is how long we've been in business, this is how great we are, this is all our capabilities, we have this capability, we have that capability. And I had to say, stop, right? No, don't write like this. I basically had to say to them, nobody cares, right? I'm looking at this, and it's intensely boring to me. And they allow me, they allow me to speak freely, right? Yeah. So I'm like this is intensely boring. I just don't care. It's tedious, right? And why is that? Because I care about my business. I care about my issues. So I had to show them how to write in a way that is personally interesting to the executives that are going to read this.
Yeah, you're flipping it from about the company to about the
client. Totally. Always start with the client, and start with your understanding of what they want and what's getting in the way and what their challenges are. And then once you've set that up, now, okay, these people understand me. Okay, now that you understand, how can you help me? And then you can pivot to, in order to achieve what you're trying to do here, here's who we are, and here's what we're recommending. And if we work together, here's the result that you're going to get. So we did a lot of work on their executive summaries. We sort of like before and after. This is how you were writing before, here's how to write now. And then we did some workshops so that they could write these executive summaries in ways that are emotionally compelling. And I think that's what they were looking for. Instead of sharing just technical information, how do we write in a way that's emotionally engaging? And I get this all the time. It's not just accountants. So don't let your audience believe that they're the only ones struggling with this. Right now we're doing a lot of work with a very significant pharmaceutical firm all around the world. And these people are showing up with data, with science. And doctors are not engaged. And so when they see that the doctors are not engaged with the science and the data, what do? They give them even more science and more data, right? And so we're saying, don't do this. So it's engineers, there's just a lot of people that are doing great things with very detailed technical know-how, and they somehow believe that sharing that technical know-how is going to win the day, and it just doesn't. There's got to be a different approach.
Yeah, and so you'd said that, and I'm an accountant, and I don't take anything what you just said personally, because I see it. I think the accounting community understands that we're trained to be about the details, about data, and we've invested our careers and education into learning those deep, complex things. And so when you look at the perception of value, you believe it's in what you know.
Yes.
And I think that's what we want to convey, that story. And I think from your experience kind of coming in at it differently, not as an accountant coming in, it probably jumped out at you pretty quickly that, if they're not closing, it's because that's the story they're telling. Is that why they're not closing? Is that sort of what you see in firms?
Yeah, I would say that, and I'm just thinking about the question you asked earlier about, accountants kind of being trained to look backwards, right? All of the data is in the past,
right?
But the value is really in the future. And so accountants, I think, in order to bring that real compelling value, I would say the reason they're not closing is it's not emotionally engaging. It's information, right? Information by itself is not emotionally engaging. What makes it emotionally engaging is the fact that I have a hope in the future, right? My business, let's say I'm a manufacturer, and we have suffered through the past 12, 15 months, and we're trying to get our get our groove back here, and you're coming in as my accountant. Just telling me what happened in the past, that's not enough, and just telling me how qualified you are, that's not enough. But really understanding the pain that I have gone through, and where I'm trying to rebuild, and what I'm trying to do with my people, and the opportunities that are opening up to us that we're not really sure, should we invest here or not? I think having an accountant that understands me at that level and is coming alongside me to say, and I don't want to overuse the term, but let me be your trusted advisor here and help you navigate these uncharted waters, that's now emotionally compelling. But just showing up and giving me your credentials, I don't want to be disparaging in any way, but they're a dime a dozen, right? How many accountants are there out there? I could probably do a Google search, say how many accountants are in Toronto. I don't know, 50,000.
Lots.
But the one that can show up and say, Adrian, I get what you're trying to do with your business. I get where you're coming from, where you're trying to go. I have some experience in this area. You're similar to another customer that I have who was facing something similar. Here's what we did with them. We think we could help you as well. That's got my attention at a subconscious emotional level. There's a connection being made that is highly valuable, and that I need you now for the long term.
Yeah, it's everything you're saying is resonating with me. I grew up in an accounting family, and I think that's probably why I ended up where I started my career as an accountant. And my dad always used to say, there's two things in life that are guaranteed: death and taxes. And I think that perspective was that there's always going to be a need for accountants. There's always going to be work there. It's always going to be like that. And it's just, clients are going to come. It's going to just be there. And so the stories, I think accountants learn is just, well, we're needed. We're going to do this. But I truly believe that that's changing a lot. And I don't think that those traditional, what we thought were timeless stories as accountants apply today. And so the progressive firms are telling different stories. You helped some of the larger firms look at their storytelling. So what are they doing? Like when you're looking at those firms, what types of stories are they telling their clients now? Obviously they're connecting more emotionally, but what is the story that you're seeing resonate the most?
So again, it's just going back to that example that I shared with you, one of these very top 4 accounting firms. One of the other things they learned is that people are interested in people. So a lot of their stories, first of all, were about themselves. And secondly, were sort of at this business case level. So they had business cases. Well, if you want me to get excited emotionally, you've got to bring a business is really an abstract kind of accounting concept. There's a very sophisticated part of the brain that's required to understand the concept that a business is a legal person, it's a legal entity. Like this is very sophisticated thinking. You can't explain this to a 4-year-old child. But a 4-year-old child is interested in other 4-year-old children. That's just wired into us. So one of the things we had them do was to take these business cases and stop writing about businesses. Instead, write about people, right? Instead of writing about Acme Corporation, talk to us about Bob, the VP of Manufacturing at Acme Corporation. Because if I'm the VP of Manufacturing at my organization, I'm now really concerned and interested about what this other VP of Manufacturing did in a situation similar to mine. There's something in our brains called mirror neurons, and they switch on very quickly as we empathize with other humans. And so that was a really big shift for them. And in fact, it's a big shift for many, many customers that I deal with. Stop talking about companies. Stop writing business cases. If you want to be emotionally compelling, bring it down to a personal level and tell me about other human beings.
Yeah, on the challenge is, I think as accountants, we want to spend time talking about the numbers. And when it comes to emotion and some of the softer things, we're maybe a little bit less comfortable having those types of conversations. So how do you talk about engineers and certain professions that are kind of wired that way. How do you help them in training? How do you help them get over some of those mindsets or understand that it's a skill that's developed? It's just not innate.
It's a fantastic question. And really, number one is this notion of patience. So often I will ask them about just TV shows that they watch and why they watch them and why they find them compelling. And one of the things that they eventually come to realize is great storytellers do not give you all the information up front. The reason you keep watching is because they have withheld information from you.
Right.
I'm at the end of episode 1 and I need more. I need what's going to happen next? I have to watch episode 2. So one of the things that we have to frame for them is all of those numbers that you want to share, you're going to share them, but you're going to share them in episode 2. So hold that off. In episode 1, you've got to set up the emotional engagement. You've got to set up the context. So we really train them on how to engage their customers and prospects in ways that are going to be emotionally compelling. And once you've got their emotional attention, now you can show them the numbers because now they care. But if you lead with the numbers, they don't care. You can say all the same things in episode 2 and they're totally intrigued. But if you say those things in episode 1, they don't care. It's tedious and it's boring. So I think being able to frame what it is you do as accountants, being able to frame that with context that creates emotional engagement and high value.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about shifting gears just a little bit. Let's talk about some of the tools that you use. So helping them take a look at that, helping them break their process into step 1, step 2. You've got a lot of things that you do, but I want to come back to one that I'd seen you go through, which is this concept of a winner's quadrant. And let's share a little bit about that with our audience, just in terms of what that means, and maybe convey that back to the accounting profession.
Yeah, that takes a little while to unpack. In fact, I have a webinar coming up on June 16th. It's next week. So maybe if anybody's interested, wanted to know a bit more about that, they could just reach out to me. And I'll give them the registration link. It's a free webinar, and I'll take an hour to unpack this question that you've just asked. But it's something that just came to me as I've worked with organizations from the smallest startup to some of the largest companies in the world. And I just began to see this pattern of how companies grow and mature over time. So part of it has to do with the maturation cycle of organizations and how they grow and evolve. The other part of it has to do with what we were talking about earlier, the relationship life cycle, and how organizations are able to build more strategic relationships, going from transactional to more strategic relationships, or going from just dating to a business marriage, how they actually do that over time. And it's the intersection of these two life cycles, what I call the enterprise life cycle, how companies mature, and the relationship life cycle, how they build more mature and committed relationships with their customers, When you are a very mature and agile organization, and you have the ability to pivot, and you pivot based on the mature and committed relationships you have with your customers, where you're gaining very deep insights into their world and how they create value for their customers and the challenges that they have in doing that, and the insights that they're giving to you. When you're able, and I say that sales has to become the ears of the organization, not just the mouthpiece. That sales are interacting, and hopefully at senior levels, with your most important customers, and they're hearing things that create great input for your strategic direction. So integrating what sales is hearing from your best customers into your strategic planning, so that you're able to make pivots that are going to be very perceived as high value from your best customers. This is what I call the winner's quadrant. And so there are 4 quadrants. Again, it takes a little while to unpack this, but in a nutshell, if we are just in a transactional relationship with our customers, and at the same time we've built up these systems that don't give us enterprise flexibility, we are doomed. It's just a matter of time. On the other hand, we need systems in order to scale. But as we build these systems, we have to put the customer at the center of these systems. And as we do that, the systems will continue to evolve over time to ensure that we're always creating value for the customer. So the winner's quadrant, is this place where companies have huge momentum. They have huge profitability coming into them. The best people want to work for them. The best customers want to work with them, but they don't take it for granted. They take all of this inflow and they use it to constantly figure out, where do we need to go next? And it's not guessing. It's in collaboration with their best customers. So as they make these strategic decisions, customers are rewarding them immediately. This is exactly what we need. And so they're able to just maintain this profit momentum within that quadrant.
Yeah, I would strongly encourage our listeners to attend Adrian's online courses. I've had a chance to go through them, and they're fantastic, and absolutely it's worth unpacking and spending the hour. Adrien, you mentioned the relationship life cycle. The thing I loved about it is you're talking about, you're starting with strangers, and you're trying to work clients through that relationship life cycle up to strategic ally. And a couple of the stopping points along the way is sort of that trusted advisor status. And I know within the financial services profession, accountants are often considered the most trusted advisor for a client's advisors, but that's not sort of the end goal. And I love this concept of, you're going from somebody you're just meeting and you're moving up the chain to trusted advisor. But just share with me sort of that perspective on what the difference between a trusted advisor and a strategic ally is, because I think that's changed my perspective on really where the end goal is, or where accountants should be striving for.
Very good. And maybe just quickly to go back in case listeners are not aware of this life cycle. Again, it's about relationship. Who we are is who we are, Tim. Who you and I are today, we're the same person tomorrow. Who we are at home, we should be the same person in business as well. So wherever people meet us, we are who we are. And that's how we begin to build real relationships. And sales should be a very authentic relationship building approach, where we start out as strangers. I don't know you, you don't know me, but you suspect I need an accountant. And so we interact. You have ways of marketing to get my attention. So you go from stranger now to supplier. And it's very important that for the audience, we don't do this. We're not moving the customer through this life cycle. They're pulling us through the life cycle. It's up to the customer where we sit on this life cycle. This is their perception of the relationship and where they want the relationship. So there's something about you, Tim. There's something about our interaction. I decide I'm going to do business with you. Mm-hmm. Now you become a supplier. So you're a supplier in my world. You haven't converted me from a prospect to a customer. I've converted you from a stranger to a supplier. Now we're transacting, but there's something about the way you do business that, hey, you're a desired supplier. I really like to do business with you. I'm going to give you preferential treatment over your competition. Now, to move to a trusted advisor, which is really the first step in a strategic relationship, I call this the pivot from content to context. What makes the trusted advisor is the context that they have. So content means you're an expert in accounting. If I ask you about certain tax laws or deductions, whatever, you're an expert. That's content. Context is you become an expert in my business. So you really understand my business, you understand my people, you understand the history, the politics, the personalities, the procedures. This is context. This is what makes you a trusted advisor. Now, if I say to you, Tim, we're thinking of making this investment, but we're not sure, or we're thinking of hiring this new expert in our business, but it's a new area. Now when I talk to you, I feel very comfortable having this conversation with you because I know you have context. You're an expert in my business. This is the trusted advisor. The trusted advisor relationship is very personal. So if I'm calling your company, I'm not calling to talk to anybody in the company. It's not that I have a trusted advisor relationship with the company. It's that I have a trusted advisor relationship with Tim. When I call and I ask for Tim, if Tim's not available, then have him call me because I'm not going to talk to anybody else about this. It's a very personal relationship. And so a lot of people don't realize that the trusted advisor status is very personal. It's between two people. That's great. It takes a long time to get there, but it's also very dangerous for the company because if Tim leaves the company, the relationship leaves with him. So let's just say it was Welco. Welco is not my trusted advisor. Tim is.
Right.
So after 6 years, let's say, of building this relationship, and then Tim leaves, Welco doesn't have the relationship. It goes with Tim. So from a company perspective, it's important to get to this trusted advisor status. But once you get there, you have to reinforce it with multiple trusted advisor relationships to really create the zipper concept that we're going to have multiple people on our side build trusted advisor relationships with multiple people on their side. And we create this zipper. So if one person leaves, it's not the end of the relationship, right? And that's what then sets us up for the highest level, which is really the business marriage level, which is what we call the strategic alliance. This is a true partnership, and this is not between people, it's between companies. Your company and my company agree to move forward as allies. And this is where now we're going to co-create value together for the end customer.
I love that. You've put it so simply. It's always been something that as we looked at firms, like we get the idea that, you start your career as accountant, you're focused on content, you're subject matter experts, you're kind of working through that. And then as you start getting more into the relationship side, you're working towards that partner level within a firm, you're getting more context. And you can't really get to that level unless you're prepared to go to some of the tough areas, the personal areas, the emotional areas.
Yes, exactly.
And some accountants struggle with that, and the ones that are successful and keep moving are the ones that understand that they have to go to that area. But I love that next evolution of organizations and understanding that, you got to let your ego also get out of the way.
That's right on.
Because you really don't have a company that has a lot of value if you can't replace yourself and if you can't have other people in the organization that are doing that. So I love how you've put that. It's really helped me, Adrian, get my head around really what the goal of our organization is, or even the accounting community we're working with. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to pivot now a little bit, Adrian. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the books that you've got and resources that you're able to provide to your contacts in the community. You wrote a book, Human to Human Selling. Chat a little. That was a number of years ago now. To chat a little bit about that experience and how that's worked out for you.
Yeah, so that was a very interesting experience. So I'm also a speaker, I'm a keynote speaker, do a lot of keynotes and workshops. And part of the exercise was to have a book, to be a published author, to sort of add that credibility as a speaker. So I knew I had to have a book and a lot of ideas in my head that I was developing. These were unique ideas that I was trying to, crystallize. So the process of writing the book helped me do that. It was just an ability to say, let me get this down on paper. So this was a very challenging experience. As I said, I had a lot of ideas and just trying to organize them. But the notion was, and I back then, this was a number of years ago, I just had this sense looking forward that there's going to be a lot more automation, a lot more artificial intelligence. And that even if you think of accountants, that you were saying earlier, your dad said, death and taxes, and you're going to be the people will always come to you. I would add one more, death, taxes, and change, and the accounting industry is being disrupted to the point where maybe customers are not going to come to you as quickly as you thought. Maybe a lot of what you thought were very complex decision points, that there's going to be very intelligent software that can look after all of this. And people may be able to run businesses without ever meeting with their accountant or with an accountant. We have to be ready for a future like that. So to me, I just thought in this sort of onslaught of digitization and this onslaught of automation, that there's got to be room for the human connection. And that even though maybe I can do a lot in an automated way, what is the value of having a human being in front of me that is able to connect with me at an empathetic level that technology cannot? And so that was the premise of writing the book, that we have to understand how we can connect and create value over time when we're competing against technology.
I love that hopeful comment, because I think that a lot of people that are fearful of technology and how it's going to change and what it's going to eliminate, I agree entirely, and we talk a lot about that in our organization, that you're not going to replace people.
Right.
You've got to have that personal, that emotional connection. So there's a hybrid somewhere in this between using technology as a tool and ensuring that people are still kind of leading and part of that relationship side. So that's great. So and you're working on a new book, I understand.
I am.
Talk a little bit about that.
So this book will come out by the end of the year, and I have gained so much insight in. So I mentioned earlier, when I was working for this technology company, I was 300% above quota, and guys who I thought were superior to me in selling skills, they could not sell in a down market. And I was just tearing it up. In fact, I slowed down because of these integrity issues. Like, no, I'm not going to sell if you guys are not going to deliver. So I don't know what I could have done had the organization really stood with me and committed to delivering. But in doing that, I discovered the power of storytelling, because I was new to the market. I had no customers. I understood where we were successful, and I just told those stories. And it was amazing how quickly I could get multi-million-dollar decisions because of a relevant story. And I didn't understand why. I just knew it worked, so I just kept doing it, right? But as I went into consulting and started training and had to sort of train other people on how to do what I knew worked, I started to dig into it. And today I have, I would say, a much deeper understanding and appreciation for the psychology behind storytelling. And the emotional experience of storytelling and why it drives decision making. So it's really about unpacking all of that and putting that on paper. So that's something that I'm working on now, and it's really it's very gratifying. I think the first book was very challenging because I had never written before. Now I have a better sense of the process. So I'm enjoying this.
So when can we expect this new book?
We're aiming for November. Okay,
cool. We'll make sure I go through it. It sounds exciting.
It really does, yeah. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, well, that's great. So other resources, I know, you've got a blog. There's a lot. You're amazing at sharing, and I love that, because lots of companies you go to, it's sort of like tight, and but you're sharing a lot of information through your site. Maybe talk about some of the things that people can find and learn more about you and more about some of the things you train on.
Thanks. The best way to get to the site is just go to adriandavis.com, ADRIAN, Davis, DAVIS.com, adriandavis.com. That'll take you to Whetstone Inc. And again, I appreciate you observing that we love to share. I've built lots of tools and templates and things over time, and I share those freely. One of the things that I think your audience may benefit from is a spreadsheet, because I know you guys like spreadsheets.
You had us at spreadsheet. Right now, the listeners, they just stopped listening and they're going to the site now.
Yeah, so I have a spreadsheet that I developed to identify your right fit customers. So for example, I'm working with an organization now that sells to credit unions. And what we've determined for them is there are certain credit unions that are just too big. That if they go after those credit unions, the relationship is going to be transactional. Mm-hmm. Then there are other credit unions that are just too small, that they just bring too much heft for those credit unions. But there's a band of credit unions in the middle that it's just right for them, that they're not going to have this kind of capability internally, and they're going to be able to meet with the C-suite and build strategic relationships with the C-suite. So they take this spreadsheet and they can create these, what are the attributes that demonstrate that this customer is going to be strategic to us? But then what are the attributes that give us evidence that we are going to be strategic to them? And we need this balance because we're looking for long-term relationships. They have to be strategic to us. We have to be strategic to them. And I just have this way that they can go through and score from 1 to 5 on these attributes. And it creates this sort of heat map with red, yellow, green. Creates a heat map where you can now see, wow, I thought this was one of our better customers. But when we actually put them through the, the cold light of day analysis, this is not actually our strongest customer. This one is. And so now that we see where the strong customers are, we know where we need to roll out the red carpet, because you can't spread yourselves too thin. So you have to sort of make these calculated bets of where do we invest, where do we give that VIP treatment, and this spreadsheet will help them do that. So if they reach out to me, Adrien at adriandavis.com, I'm happy to send that spreadsheet out to them. And I think it proves to be very, very insightful. It's like, wow. And then that helps us know, okay, we need to go after more customers like this, or we need to negotiate and talk to these customers about how they can improve the relationship. And I'm sorry, Tim, there's something that you said earlier that I wanted to just come back to. And it was along the lines that accountants kind of don't want to go in those uncomfortable emotional areas.
Yeah.
And I think, you know what? Everything that we do for the first time, or we do that's outside of our comfort zone, it's going to feel awkward. But it's amazing how, with a little bit of know-how, and especially like what I find with accountants, engineers, they like process. So when we give them a bit of a process, even though we're dealing with the emotion, there is a process to dealing with it, that they're willing to step out of their comfort zone and to start to work with it. And it's like, okay, now this makes sense. Now I understand why people react in certain emotional ways. But you do have to go there.
No, accountants hate winging it. And
right, exactly.
Being able to, like you say, lay it out in a way that can be replicated, and
right.
they don't have to feel they have to come up with it on their own.
Right.
To have those kinds of conversations, I think that's bang on. I again encourage you all to go check out Adrian's site. He mentioned the spreadsheet, different things. There's so many great videos and tools that are on there. Great giveaways there. And Adrian, let's come back to your upcoming events. You present. You mentioned being a keynote. I mean, that's an understatement. You do presentations all over the place, all over the world. You're sought after. And you're doing a lot of webinars, and you've got your sessions you're doing on value selling mastery. Talk a little bit about that. You've got an upcoming date. We're in Canada here. There's some sessions you're doing out in the West in Vancouver, in Alberta, virtually. Just talk a little bit about those sessions again.
Yeah, so most of my sessions are private sessions, and then what I'm doing now is once a quarter to do a webinar that's public, that anybody can attend, and then there's also replays. We'll send out webinar replays as well. So I mentioned June 16th. This is 2021, June 16th. I realize that people might be listening to this after the fact, so
right,
June. Yeah. But again, the webinar replay is available if they miss it. That one's called Outside In, where sales and strategy meet. And it's this whole notion that as you're going to build your company strategically, as you're going to make those right strategic decisions, you have to integrate your sales activities and the insights that are coming from your sales activity into your strategic planning. So we're going to be talking about that and showing how that all comes together. So as I mentioned, every quarter, just based on the interaction that we have with our customers, we're going to do something public so that others can benefit. But most of the work that I do is private, even though it's all over the world, especially now virtually. We're pulling in people from, we're doing a lot of work in Asia right now, which means a lot of late nights, do a lot of work in Europe, which means early mornings, and across Canada and the United States.
Well, that's awesome. I'm sure you're going to get some people that are wanting to sign up to check that out. if they want to talk to you directly, if they want to learn more about how they can engage with your company and access the services, what is the best way to go about doing that, Adrian?
So adriandavis.com, contact us, and we'll get back in touch with them right away. And we're good in terms of providing a 30-minute consultation and just sort of listening what they're trying to achieve. And then sometimes we're not the best fit for everybody, so we will pick that up right away. But we have a great network, so sometimes people are looking for something that's outside the lines of what we do. But as I mentioned, we have a fantastic network, so we're based on what they're looking for, we can connect them with the right resource.
Well, thank you so much, Adrian, for today. I could have talked for another hour with you. There were many things I wanted to get into, but for the sake of time, we'll save that for the next time you join us on our podcast.
Episode 2.
Episode 2. Thank you again. Great sharing and knowledge. Lots of value, I'm sure. And on that note, this ends this edition of the Innovative Accountant Podcast.